Eric, E-R-I-C, Epley, E-P as in pig, L-E-Y, Executive Director / CEO. STRAC is Southwest Texas Regional Advisory Council, and then usually parentheses STRAC at the end of that, or skip it, just put STRAC, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Talk about what your role is and as specifically to how the Baptist interacts with you, but your role in the community.
So the quick elevator speech about STRAC is we're here to develop, implement, and maintain the regional trauma and emergency healthcare system for 22 counties in and around San Antonio, Texas. We're much bigger than the regional trauma and emergency healthcare system at this point, but our core membership, our real job, as I tend to think of it, is making sure that our hospital members, all the hospitals in this area and in the region, and all the EMS agencies and helicopters are members, is making sure they work seamlessly together to get the patient to the right place and the right time by the right method every single time. Doesn't matter if you're in Del Rio or you're in Fredericksburg or you're in San Antonio at the mall. Everything should happen the same every single time. So a lot of people don't know who we are. That means we're doing our job and the system's working right. So the fact people don't always know who we are is actually helpful for me.
How has it, let's talk about the pandemic first. What has your role been? And I guess would you brag a little bit about you? Because I think that this has been a model for the whole country, how this has worked.
Let me go back to the thing and brag on Baptist first about some other stuff.
Okay,
so.
Okay, hang on, okay, go.
So every one of our healthcare systems in San Antonio, we have Baptist, we have Christus, who's part of the Christus network. Of course, Methodist is part of the HCA network, and University Health System is the public hospital, is the Bexar County Hospital District. All of those systems are, of course, fierce competitors, but they have the better part of their soul. Let me start that over again. That was going to be so good. Our membership is made up of some of the best hospital systems in the country. We have Baptist Health System, which you guys know is Tenet, Christus Health System, HCA is here, they're the Methodist healthcare system, and of course University Hospital is Bexar County Hospital District, the county public hospital. Those institutions are all fierce competitors, but in San Antonio, in this market, they come together collaboratively. We have a term we call co-opetition. And what that means is that we're going to do what's best for the patient across the entire spectrum of our healthcare system. And they're the epitome of some of the best behavior by their leaders. Matt Stone has been phenomenal. George Trevino, his passing is terribly hurtful for our organization, and we know it hurts you guys as well. He was a huge leader in the pandemic and was a tremendous loss to our entire operation. But every part of the Baptist health system has been phenomenal, and it's stepped up in this pandemic. It's just been unbelievably helpful to make sure we make it through this.
Great. And how has it worked through the pandemic to take care of the patients?
So our response to the pandemic has been multifaceted. If you remember, we started on February 7th. When the first planes landed from Wuhan, the 747s, they landed here only about half a mile away from my office here near Lackland Air Force Base. And that started the clock for us, and we're nearing now a 1-year mark. Baptist has been involved in every single step along the way, and we have 2 major groups that meet. I have a CEO group that meets regularly, and I have a med leads group with the system CMOs and system CNOs every day. We meet for 30 minutes every single day on a phone call for the last year, basically. And it's through that coordination and effort that we've managed to load balance and power through. Almost every single decision that we've made has been done collaboratively and with consensus. Visitor policies inside the hospital, very, very sensitive issue, for instance. We made sure all the systems did the same policy at the same time, so there was no confusion among the general population about what the policies were in the hospitals, and that saved us a great deal with respect to people understanding what's going on in San Antonio. We have patients get stranded out in some of the rural areas sometimes, and we do the HELP call. We call it the Hospital Executive Leadership Protocol, HELP, or HELP calls. And we put all the executives on a call at the same time and say, we don't want any patient to ever be stranded in South Texas. And so we work together to find a bed, even when we think there may not be one under normal circumstances. Those are the kinds of simple processes we've done, but when you put them all together in total, it shows how this collaborative spirit has worked, and Baptist has led through that effort the entire time.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about pandemic, or move on to behavioral health?
No, everything else.
Okay.
It's pandemic.
All right, behavioral health. I think that some of the monies that the tenant folks provided were to go to that. Can you talk about how that money has been used, or how it's been supportive to you in the community?
I didn't ever realize I would be involved in crisis mental health, although it's a much more obvious linkage now with our job in the trauma and emergency healthcare system. So much of the emergency healthcare system is wrapped up with mental health issues, whether it's nurse attacks and violence, whether it's ER holds in the healthcare system. But we became involved in that effort through a program we call the South Texas Crisis Collaborative, or STIC. If you torture that long enough, it'll spell STIC. STIC is our steering committee has all the major health systems, the city, the county, the police department, the sheriff's office, and other stakeholders involved in that, including Methodist Ministries, Kronkowski, San Antonio Area Foundation, and other large philanthropic groups. And of course, a key component of that is the Tenet Foundation. The dollars that have been provided by the Tenet Foundation, along with the other healthcare systems, have provided some of the most innovative, record-breaking models that have been shown across the nation as best practice. And without those dollars, we would not have been able to make that happen in San Antonio.
What kinds of things have you been able to do for patients?
Some of our projects include law enforcement navigation. Prior to us putting this in place, a policeman would go to the Walmart and have a person that was acting out in mental health crisis. They would take control of the situation, put them in the squad car, and take them to a local ER. And they may be in that local ER for 90, 100 hours before they can be transferred to a psychiatric facility that has the capability and capacity to accept the transfer. Now we do an assessment on scene. We have paramedics respond to that scene, and we clear them medically. We found that over half of the patients brought to the ER had no medical conditions whatsoever. They were just in crisis mentally. And so we thought, well, we bring trauma patients to the trauma center, we bring stroke patients to the stroke center, and if they're medically competent, why would we bring psych patients? We should take them to the psych center and start their psychiatric emergency care immediately. So that's what we're doing now, and we do that 1,100 to 1,200 times a month. Those are patients that are not going to the emergency room anymore. They're getting treatment faster and getting better faster.
Awesome. I don't know if they're going to use this, but you want to make a plea for additional funding?
No?
Okay.
Not right now. I'm not in the right
Not
mindset.
in the funding mood. Okay. Anything else you want to say about the partnership with Baptist, Tenet support, or what you're able to do with it? Anything else?
I would say that Tenet's support for this effort is critical, that it is consistent with what the other healthcare systems are doing. It is in conjunction with the city, the county, other philanthropies are all in this together. And when you see that there's parity, when you see that everyone's participating at the same level, that makes those asks a little bit easier to understand. I know that's a difficult time for foundations to work through different requests, and one of the things I think that they need to know is that we're responsible with those dollars. They're being evaluated with key performance indicators and common metrics across every single program we're doing, and they're evaluated monthly by the hospital CEOs, the city and county leadership, to make sure we're getting the most bang for the buck with those dollars, and we deeply appreciate them for San Antonio.
Anything else?
Boom. So this is MedCom. This is our Regional Medical Communications Center. These consoles here are 4 communication specialists that deal with the law enforcement navigation, our mental health opportunities, our trauma transfer capabilities, where we do 500 critical trauma transfers every month, 1,100 law enforcement navigations. And then also on this side, we're dealing with helicopters that are inbound to San Antonio. So we organize every helicopter that's coming in to do sort of helipad management, because we don't want any patient ever having to wait to unload. So we have cameras on all the helipads, real-time weather. Over here is the watch commander. So there's a senior supervisor on duty that's a paramedic or a nurse that we've had for, they've been in the region for 10 or 15 years, and the Medcom watch commander, hey Melissa. Then over here, this is one of our newest stations. This is where we're doing telemedicine with, we're doing telehealth, telemedicine, psych consults, so that we can talk in a sort of a force multiplier instead of having the psychiatric people come to each hospital and visit in a, one by one. We can do these telehealth visits very rapidly, and so it's a force multiplier for our mental health providers to be able to do that faster. So this area here right now is a temporary operation we call the State Coordination Center, and we're operating through the Emergency Medical Task Force program across the state, organizing hospital transfers, and so patients that become stranded in El Paso, for instance, or in other locations, to get them to Dallas or Houston or San Antonio. That was happening in here, along with Medcom, and organizing not only the interfacility transfer itself, but also the air transport, and so arranging those jets to take those patients. All was happening in here. So this is one of our large conference rooms. We use this with social distancing to be able to bring in command staff, city leadership, the mayor, the judge, the CEOs, and we can have a socially distanced meeting and be comfortable. We have a much larger room downstairs that holds normally about 200, but we've turned that into one that holds about 50 in a socially distanced fashion, and also has telecommunications and the ability to do Zoom calls and stuff like that real time as well.